And anyway, so welcome to another one of Mayan's online classes. Tonight we are very happy to have Attia giving the first class. She's giving one class tonight, and then again on Tuesday night. Wednesday night you'll all be really getting ready for Yontif, but Tuesday night we have Rachel Slutsky giving a class on if the Jews got the Torah, what did the Gentiles get, and a look at the Noahide laws. So that should be another exciting class. Also, just to put on your calendar, we have our monthly 9 to 9 meeting, which will be meeting on June 2nd with Rachel Danziger. And then Ellie Rizel will be teaching a class on Wednesday, June 10th. We're still working out those details, so keep an eye out on your emails. Mayan's putting out a class, about every week over the summer. We're hoping to continue on the online classes. So we hope you'll join us. Tonight we were co-sponsored, Shari Tefillah, Congregation Shari Tefillah is co-sponsoring the class with us, so we're very grateful to that. If you or your organization, Shul, wants to co-sponsor a class with us over the summer, we're more than happy to work that out. Anyone who's looking to make a dedication, email me, director@mayan.org. I hope to see you again at other classes, and any questions, any suggestions about classes, again, email me, director@mayan.org, or you can chat something to me in the window. But now we are very excited to have Tal, who we were very pleased to have with when she was in the Boston area, and now has become, even before COVID-19, has become one of our online teachers. So we're very happy to welcome Tal back for another class with Mayan. So thank you, and wishing everyone a Chag Sameach. So thank you, Tal.
Thank you, Alana. I see a whole bunch of new faces here. I also see some returning faces. So I always like to tell the story of how I ended up teaching with Mayan. And I actually forgot about it until tonight when my mother said, "How did you even get connected with Mayan anyway?" And I remembered that when I was a college student, a few years ago, I visited Boston as part of a traveling Beit Midrash, if you will, with YU. And our group was asked to do.
Sorry, I muted Tal. Okay, go Tal.
Oh, did anybody hear anything?
I'm just muting everyone else, but I will not mute Tal again. So.
Okay, so
if you have something to say, you can unmute yourself, but I'm going to mute everybody else except for Tal.
Thank you. Okay, so my group was asked to come in and do some guest lecturing with Mayan. This was really a while back, and I did that once, and it was a really exciting opportunity for me. I think it was my first year ever that I gave, and then time went on, and I went to college, finished college, I got married, I moved to Israel, and then when I came back to Boston as part of JLIC on campus, Alana reached out to me and asked if I would teach again, and ever since then, I've kind of been hooked. You guys are one of my favorite groups to teach, so thank you so much for having me again tonight. And it's really nice to see some of my Brandeis students here too. That's a fun treat. Hi, guys. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to talk about tonight is the upcoming Chag of Shavuot, and specifically about an element of it that I really never gave any thought to until one day I randomly started looking into this. It piqued my interest, and it became a topic that I couldn't stop thinking about, couldn't stop learning about, and that is the topic of Bikurim, the first fruits. And the reason that the Bikurim, the first fruits, are relevant to Shavuot is a few things which we'll see over the course of this year, but first just a cute hint, because we always need one of those. If you look at the name Shavuot, there's actually a hint to all the different elements of the holiday just in the name itself. So the Shin stands for Shavuot, the classic name for it, and this has to do with the festival of the weeks, right? The end of the counting of Sphira, or perhaps the oaths, the promise that took place between God and the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah. Then we have Bet, that's for the Bikurim, for these first fruits. We'll learn more about that over the course of tonight. We have Ayin for Atzeret. This means to withdraw or refrain, and this is a name for Shavuot that appears in the Gemara, but not in Chumash at all. And this has to do with the Shtei Halechem, the korban, the sacrifice that was brought on Shavuot. And it could also mean, Atzeret could also mean an assembly, a festive assembly, which Shavuot indeed is. And the last element of Shavuot that's found in the name is the Taf, Torah. We know that this is probably the most famous attribute that we think of when we think of Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah. Also famous is that this is not what biblically the holiday is really about. There is not a biblical connection between Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, and Shavuot, which is why when I like to teach about Shavuot, I actually like to refrain from the Matan Torah aspect of it and look more at the agricultural roots of the holiday. And that brings us to Bikurim tonight. So a little bit about Bikurim first, because if you're like I was before this interest was piqued, you might not know a lot about what Bikurim are. So I'll tell you that these are the first fruits of the harvest that the farmers in Israel would notice. They would go out into their fields and they would see buds starting to blossom, and specifically in the 7 special fruits, the wheat, the barley, the grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, dates, they would look at these buds and say, these are my first fruits. I'm going to dedicate these essentially to God. I'm going to set these aside. And Midrash tells us, I don't believe that this is found in the Torah itself, that the farmer would take a red string and he would tie it around these budding fruits and say, Harei zeh Bikurim, I'm setting these aside. So with that, what I'd like to do is have us jump inside the sources. I'm going to share my screen. Just by show of hands, does everybody have the source sheet in front of them? Okay, so some people do, some people don't. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen if I can. Alana, am I able to?
Yes, you're able to share your screen, and yes, not everyone has the source sheet.
Okay.
But if someone wants me to email them the source sheet, just private chat me right now, and I can send you a link to the source sheet in your email. I just don't have it. I don't have a link set up, but I can send you the attachment.
So Alana, the one thing is it says host disabled participant share screening. So she's screen sharing.
Good.
So
here, try again.
I could try it again. Sorry, Brian, these are Zoom technicalities.
You should be able to.
Okay, yeah, that should work. Okay. Okay.
That worked?
It worked? Okay, but you're looking at Zoom, right? Okay. Okay. Are you able to see that?
Yes, you have the Mayan logo? Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. And now I just want to be able to see you guys too. Sorry about this, guys. I don't know if I can do that. I just can't see you while I'm sharing my screen.
I promise you they're all still there, so I'm smiling.
Okay, fine. So we'll have to go with that. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so what I'd like to do is jump into source number 1 together. Oh, there's our cute little hint over there. I'd like to jump into source number 1, and this is a source that discusses the Bikurim, but also the Shtei HaLechem, which is the main mitzvah of Shavuot. And I'd like to just look at it inside, if that's okay, without too much context. Would somebody be willing to read source number 1 for us? I can't see you, so if you could just jump up and start reading.
I can. וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת מיום, הביאכם את עומר התנופה 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינך. And from the day in which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. עד ממחרת השבת השביעית תספרו 50 יום והקרבתם מנחה חדשה Ladonai. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of new grain to the Lord. Mi moshvotechem taviu lechem tnufa 2 shnei esronim solet tiyena chametz teafena bikurim ladonai. You shall bring from your settlements 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering. Each shall be made of 2/10 of a measure of choice flour, baked after leavening as first fruits to the Lord.
Okay, thank you. So we have here the main mitzvah of Shavuot. This is the Shtei Alechem described in these psukim. I have to say that I've never actually appreciated the value of bringing flour as an offering so much as I do right now in this Corona era where flour seems hard to come by. Just goes to show that you can always approach your Torah sources with a different lens and a different context. But we have here this mitzvah of Bikurim. And there's a very interesting midrash that discusses this mitzvah of Bikurim that is, I think, rather shocking. You'll tell me if you agree when you learn it here. It discusses the value of the Bikurim. This is Bereshit Rabbah, and it says, "B'zchut shlosha dvarim nivra ha'olam." In the merit of three things, the world was created. B'zchut chala, b'zchut ma'asrot, in the merit of chala, in the merit of tithes, and lastly, b'zchut bikurim, in the merit of these first fruits. The ein reshit ela bikurim, and the world was not created if not for bikurim. Shene'emar reshit bikurei admatecha v'gomer. And this proof says that the beginning refers to the first fruits, the beginning of the first land. So this rather shocking statement on the part of Chazal, the sages, saying that the entire world was created on the merit of these first fruits, these bikurim. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second just to see you guys. By a show of hands, how many of you find that kind of surprising? Does anyone not find it surprising? Anyone think they have an explanation for this? Why would the entire world have been created for Bikurim? I mean, I'll just tell you, like, is this a mitzvah that you've ever thought about until right now, if we're being honest? So what's so important about it?
But there's other things that they say the world was created for. You know, this is probably like a whole list of, you know, no, this is my favorite, you know.
So you think that it's kind of, these are the sages just fighting out which is their favorite mitzvah? And
I mean, they said the world was created because of Brit Milah. I mean, you know, so I don't know all the rest of it, but I suspect there are others. Just my guess.
I like to think, I had never come across them before, but it occurs to me that in both Brit Milah and in these, and in any other that we would have, God is offering us the opportunity to give back to God out of our love and gratitude, and that is something that makes creation worthwhile all by itself.
Beautiful. So hold on to that thought. I think we will touch on that tonight. So just kind of going back to this sentiment or this question of, but there are other things that are listed in this midrash and maybe in other midrashim as well. This is certainly the language that Chazal like to use. It's a very extreme way of speaking where they kind of place emphasis on the importance of something by saying the entire world was created for this. So obviously it's not literal that the entire world was created exclusively for Bikurim, because within the same sentence we see the entire world was also created exclusively for Chala and exclusively for the Masrot. So it's an extreme way of saying this is something really, really important. And the question that I have, and I'll tell you honestly, it's not just my own question, the Al-Sheikh asks the same question, is what could be so important about these Bikurim? Why would Chazal have made this extreme statement to say the entire world was created for these Bikurim? And the Al-Sheikh even says something in a rather sarcastic or funny way where he says the whole world was seriously created for something worth less than half a dinar, which is a very small amount of money. It's really that important. So what's going on here? So what I'd like to do now is look a little bit more into the sources surrounding Bikurim, try to understand more about what this mitzvah is, what the Torah tells us about it, what we learn about learning about it. So if you'll join me in looking at source number 3, Alana, this is where I'm going to need some technical help. What I'd like to do is have you guys split up into groups to learn the next source, into breakout rooms. This is source number 3 in Dvarim. And what I'd like you to keep in mind, if you have a pen, you might want to write this down. As you're learning source number 3, I'd like you to keep in mind the following questions. 1, what are the 2 parts of the mitzvah of Bikurim? There are two distinct parts of this mitzvah. What are they? That's one. The second question I have for you is, what is the mindset that the Torah asks us to have while doing the mitzvah of Bikurim? What are we supposed to be thinking about? And the last one is just, what other questions do you have about these psukim? Does anything stand out to you? Does anything seem out of place? Does anything bother you? You can freestyle that last one. So, Alana, how can we do breakout rooms?
Okay. So I think what we can do is, how many people do you want, like, per group? We can
Maybe 4.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make like 6 breakout groups. We have 24 people, and you're just going to get randomly assigned, and you're going to meet a new friend, or 3 new friends. So I'm going to create it, and I guess turn on your video and unmute yourself once you get into the breakout room so that you can see each other and get to know each other a little bit as you're studying.
And
okay.
I'll be here. You can pop back in with any questions. I think you can leave your breakout room to come back to me, hopefully. And then, or you could chat in the group chat if you have any questions. And let's take 5 to 7 minutes with this, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Lana.
Okay, I'm opening all rooms. Never done this before.
Did you get through the material? Not all of it. Okay, sorry about that. We'll work with what we got. Okay, so I'm actually gonna put the ball in your court. How'd the learning go? Were there any thoughts, questions? Do you want to start with the questions I posed? What were the 2 parts of the mitzvah? You're all muted.
But you can unmute yourself.
Bringing the fruit to the Kohen, and then telling the story that using the words you're supposed to use.
Okay, amazing. So we have the actual bringing. We're going to call that the Hava'at Bikurim, the bringing of the Bikurim, and we have the Mikra Bikurim. That's the declaration that is made. That many of the psukim that you just read about described in detail what is supposed to be said when bringing these bikurim. Did everybody get that? Did anyone have a different breakdown of the mitzvah? Yes.
We were thinking that the first part was the counting of the Omer and all of its specificity. And the second part was all the parts of bringing of the Bikurim. Okay,
so you lumped all of the Bikurim together, but you actually added kind of an introductory part of the mitzvah, which is the Sefirot HaOmer. That's very interesting. Had not thought about it. I do think that they are intrinsically linked, but I don't think that for the purposes of the dichotomy we're looking at, that's as relevant. But I think you're right. Were there any other thoughts?
We were saying that it was filling, that there was a circle, and that bringing the Bikurim was closing the circle.
Could you say more about that?
So the circle of, like, it started with bringing it, but really that's just the introduction, and that we were going through the history, and that Bikurim is the culmination of that history.
Okay.
I have to unmute myself. Sorry, we have a little guy here.
That's okay. That's my life all the time now. So I really appreciate that you brought up this this concept of the history, right? When you were reading what the declaration, what the Mikrat Bikurim was, and this was my next question, there seems to be a heavy emphasis on what exactly?
On the redemption from Egypt.
Right.
This is the culmination of the redemption from Egypt. In other words, God didn't say, let my people go. He said, let my people go to serve me. And so when we are in the land and have the Bikurim, we have to remember we are serving Hashem.
Okay, so there seems to be some strong relationship, and you're already kind of closing some gaps here and like making a nice picture out of this, that we have this relationship between the Bikurim and the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt. It seems to be that maybe the reason we talk about Exodus when we're bringing Bikurim has to do with what the purpose of the Yetziat Mitzrayim was. Maybe this is kind of closing that circle, and we're supposed to be recognizing that we were brought out of Egypt specifically for the purpose of doing Bikurim. I'd like to take a slightly different direction with it, but I think that's very plausible and actually does fit the Pesukim very nicely. Okay, so we see this history, we see this reference to Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's a very integral part to the mitzvah of Bikurim. We're not exactly sure why yet. And then I have one last question that I want to pose to you, but I'm curious, did anyone have any other thoughts or any questions about Pesukim that stood out or didn't seem to fit in? Okay, so it could be some of you didn't get to the tail end, and I did you a disservice by giving you so short a time to study this. But if you look at the last pasuk in source number 3, this is pasuk Yud Aleph, and we can share screen. Done. Okay, so if you look at the last of the pasukim, Yud Aleph, what you'll see here is a very interesting pasuk that I think, at first glance, is kind of surprising. So we have this description of the Hava'at Bikurim, the bringing of the Bikurim, the Mikra Bikurim, the whole declaration that you say, and then the pasukim tell us, V'samachta b'chol hatov asher natan lach Hashem Elokecha lebeitecha Attia ve'alevi ve'ager asher bikribecha. And then you shall rejoice with the good that the Lord your God has granted you and your household, you, the Levite, the stranger who is amongst you. So we have this pasuk that seems to be saying, at least at first glance, and I'm sure that I'll get a million different opinions on this one, but it seems to me at first glance, this pasuk is telling us, so you're going to bring the Bikurim, and then you have to be happy. V'samachta, a directive. And to me, this is rather strange for 2 reasons. One, it seems out of place. What does v'samachta, you should be happy, have anything to do with the mitzvah that we just learned about? That's one. And 2, and this is a cliche question that people forget to ask because we've been so conditioned not to ask it, but how could the Torah command us to be happy? How could the Torah give us a commandment to feel something?
It's not.
Yeah, was there a question?
I don't think it's commanding us to be happy. I think it's commanding us to act in a certain way and to make sure to include all these other people, like the Levites who do not have Bikurim because they don't have land, or they might have a small amount, and the Gerim who also don't have land.
So you think that the v'samachta, this you will be happy?
It's not you will be happy. You will do whatever verb it is that samach is.
Okay, so you don't even think it has anything to do with happiness at all?
No. That's not true. I'm saying it's an action verb here, not a feeling verb.
Okay, this is the reason that I love learning with this group, because I always feel like the punchline is stolen in the best kind of way. So let's go with that. Okay, so we have the possibility that samachta is not a directive to feel happy, but perhaps it's a directive to do something. Maybe it does have to do with happiness, but we're not exactly sure what it means to do happy, right? It's like you never hear anybody say that. So what does that mean to do happy? So let's move along in our sources. Oh, does somebody have a thought?
Yeah, who says it's a directive? When you finished it, when you fill the circle, you're happy.
Okay, so that's another possibility, right? And it could be that it's not a directive at all. I could bring you a million verbs from other psukim in the Torah where the way that this dikduk is formulated, it does seem like a directive, but I understand the argument if you want to say it's a consequence. So happiness is a consequence of bringing Bikurim. I still have the question of what that means. Why does bringing Bikurim make you happy?
Can I say something?
Please.
Well, I didn't know if you were looking at the hand up or my waving hand, so.
Go for it.
So I think that there's something very powerful going on, that it's not just be happy and it's not just command to be happy. It's that we, having progressed to the point that we are at this stage, plus going through all the tribulations, and then, you know, cultivating the land and coming up with these Bikurim, which are, in a sense, they are blessings, you know, and we are blessed, but we're offering our blessing to the Lord. I mean, it must be this moment of profound, it's emotion that I could barely define, but it's like simcha to the max. It's joy. It's like supreme joy. It's something that's both a result of our action, but it's our inner state. And I don't know, it's maybe it's also a commandment, but we are expressing, it's something about we're in covenant with our God.
Beautiful. Okay, so really, I actually don't disagree. I don't think that the two different sides of this are mutually exclusive. The do happy and the be happy as a result of the Bikurim, I think they're really two sides of the same coin. And I'd like to look at that inside and kind of explore that idea a little bit more. But I really think that you're all intuiting what I'm getting at here. So let's look at the next source. The next few sources are really just kind of a shot approach to the psukim, of simplistic understanding of what the relationship is between the V'samachta and the Bikurim, what this relationship, why the psukim connect this idea of happiness to the psukim. So we're going to look at this approach, and then we'll look at the second approach, which I think speaks a lot more to the different ideas that were shared here in the group. So if you can all look at source number 4, this is the Rashi on our psukim. Rashi tells us that it's all about the timing, and you'll see what I mean by that. Let me share my screen for those who don't have it. Okay, would somebody be willing to read source number 4 for us, please? I can't see you, so just...
Samachta b'chol hatov mekain amru ein korin mikre b'churim ela bizman samachta bizman simcha me'atzeret va'ad hachag sha'adam milkat tavo'o v'perotav V'perotav v'yinu v'samanu aval v'hachag v'elech mevi v'enu kore.
Okay, thank you. And would you mind reading the English too?
And you shall rejoice with all the good, for here our rabbis said that the first fruits declaration is recited only at the time of rejoicing, namely from Shavuot until Sukkot, for then a person gathers in his grain, fruit, wine, and oil, over which he rejoices. However, from Sukkot and onward, he must bring his first fruits to the temple, but he does not recite the declaration.
Okay, so thank you so much for reading. So what do we have here? What does Rashi seem to be telling us? So first of all, I had you look at, yeah, sorry, someone was just talking.
Oh. Something about
I don't see everyone.
Segmentation of the year, that from Sukkot, from Shavuot to Sukkot is really the primary time of the growth, the first harvest, and the rejoicing, and the declaration, whereas from Sukkot onward, those elements don't apply.
Right. So precisely. So it seems to be, according to Rashi, and we'll see soon that Rashi didn't get this out of nowhere, but it seems to be, according to Rashi, that there are specific times of the year that are almost objective times of simcha, of national joy, right? From we differentiated before between the two different parts of the mitzvah, between the mikra and the hava'ah, the bringing and the declaration of the Bikurim. So from the time after Shavuot until Sukkot seems to be an objective time of national joy. This is when agriculturally we're bringing in our fruits for the first time. We're reaping the rewards of everything we've sowed up until now. And objectively, in an agricultural society, we are happy. And then
we are happy because we have the harvest.
Right, exactly.
So it's not a fallow year or a dry, barren year.
Right. So this is if we kind of put ourselves in the mindset of the Jews who are settling the land of Israel now or in the past, there is a certain joy that can be felt across the land when in an agricultural society we see the success of everything we've worked for until now. And then at the other time of year, we actually still bring the Bikurim. And this is why I wanted us to differentiate between the bringing and the declaration, because it seems to be that every day of the year, there's a mitzvah to bring Bikurim, but there's only one specific time of year where we do the Mikra Bikurim, where we do this declaration. The rest of the year, we still bring the Bikurim, but we don't say the whole declaration. And Rashi says it's because there's this objective time of happiness. The rest of the year, of course, we can individually be happy. As farmers, we can individually rejoice in whatever we reaped, but on a national level, there's only this one objective national time of joy. Rashi actually bases this on a debate that you'll see if you have it in front of you, source number 5. We won't do it inside, but the Gemara in Pesachim talks about a debate of whether an onain, that's somebody who has recently lost somebody but is not yet an avel because they haven't buried the deceased, so they're kind of stuck in this no man's land. They can't do mitzvot, but they are partially in mourning. So there's a question that can an onain partake in the Bikurim, in the first fruits. And the Gemara talks about how this simcha is spoken about in terms of these Bikurim, and it goes through this whole debate. So that's where Rashi draws his analysis from, that there's this objective time of year for simcha. And that's what he says the relationship is between V'samachta and the mitzvah of Bikurim that we talked about. I don't think that answers all of our questions. I don't think that gives us a full, rich understanding of what the relationship here is between the Mikra Bikurim, the Hava'at Bikurim, the simcha that we're supposed to feel, and specifically this question of what the relationship is between Yetziat Mitzrayim and Bikurim. Why are we suddenly going back to the Exodus and trying to remember that and talk about that as we're bringing these first fruits? So I'd like to take a different approach and look at this from a different perspective. So if you'll join me in looking at source number 6, and I'll do a share screen. This is the Sefer HaChinuch. I think anybody who's ever been in a shir with me knows that I love to quote the Sefer HaChinuch. It's one of my favorite and most enigmatic svarim to quote. It's a book that was written by anonymous. We don't know who actually wrote it. And it goes through all the mitzvot in the Torah in the order of the parshiot. So it goes through each parsha and it says, according to each pasuk or parak, what mitzvot are to be found therein. It describes the mitzvah, what the relationship is between the mitzvah and the pasuk that it's found in, and it kind of elucidates what all the different facets of the mitzvah are, and it does something that at the time was controversial. Again, we've been kind of conditioned out of questioning this, but it actually talks about the source for the mitzvah, the reason for the mitzvah, and this is not necessarily something that all commentators were willing to do, but the Sefer HaChinuch does it rather boldly. It gives us reasons for mitzvot. So let's look at source number 6 together. Oh, and I did not share screen. Okay. So if somebody would be willing to read 6 for us, the Sefer HaChinuch.
I can read. משרשי המצווה כדי להעלות דבר השם יתברך על ראש שמחתנו ונזכר ונדע כי מאותו ברוך הוא יגיעו לנו כל הברכות בעולם, על כן נצטווינו להביא למשרתי ביתו ראשית הפרי המתבשל באילנות מתוך הזכירה וקבלת מלכותו והודתנו לפניו כי הפירות ביתר כל הטובה מאותו יבוא Okay,
thank you. And English.
The profound significance of the mitzvah lies in placing Hashem's word at the top of our joy. We must remember and know that every blessing in the world comes from Him. We have received the commandment to bring to those who serve in his house the fruits that have ripened first on his trees. We do this in recalling and accepting the yoke of his kingdom, and by thanking him for these fruits and for all the other good things we receive from him. We then will then be worthy of a blessing, and there will be a blessing on our fruits.
Okay, thank you. So let's break this down a little bit. I wish I could do both share screening and you guys at the same time, but let's talk about this source. So what are the different elements that the Sefer HaChinuch refers to? First of all, what does he seem to say is the reason for Bikurim? What's the purpose of it? What does it do for us?
He says it's placing Hashem's words at the top of our joy, so that we remember Hashem, that our joy stems from Hashem.
Okay.
Everything comes from Hashem.
Right. So it seems to be that for the farmer in particular, the person who's involved in this agriculture, that this mitzvah is needed in order to remind him that everything is divinely orchestrated, right? And recognizing that God is behind nature is what puts God at the head of our joy, in quotes. And I'll point out that if you read the Chinuch carefully, he alludes to, though he doesn't spell it out, what we refer to as this dichotomy between the Hava'at Bikurim and the Mikra Bikurim. When he says that there's a verbal aspect to the mitzvah, he says that we do the mitzvah of Bikurim, but an important part of doing the mitzvah is recalling and accepting the yoke of heaven, thanking him for the fruits, right? This is a very active and declarative aspect of the mitzvah that we're supposed to be talking about it. And then one of the things that one of the lines that jumps out to me when I learned this chinuch is that he says, V'yeter kol hatova, and all the other good things that God does for us. So when the farmer is bringing these first fruits, he's not just coming and making a declaration and saying, thank you, God, for the amazing fruit that you helped me harvest this year. He's actually saying, thank you, God, for all the amazing fruit, but also for all the other amazing things you've done for me, which I think is a nod to the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the declaration of the thanking for the Yetziat Mitzrayim and the whole history that's in the Mikra Bikurim. So why? Why do we talk about all these other good things? Why the V'yeter kol hatova? Why do we talk about these big miracles when we're bringing Bikurim? And what does that have to do with these fruits? So what I'd like to do now is look at one of my favorite Rambans. This is not a Ramban that talks specifically about Bikurim, but I think that there's no question that it's related. And this is a Ramban where he talks about the relationship between big miracles and small miracles. So let's look together at source number 7. And would somebody like to read number 7 for us?
I just wanted to tell you, this is just incidental. If you go to view options at the top, it has a way that if you do like side by side, then you can see everything, including the screen.
Okay, let's see if I can wrangle that. It's okay. Well, in the meantime, if someone would like to read source number 7.
ומן הניסים הגדולים, lost it. המפורסמים אדם מודע בניסים הנסתרים שהם יסוד התורה כולה, שאין לאדם חלק בתורת משה רבנו עד שנאמין בכל דברינו מקורנו, שכולם ניסים אין בהם טבע ומנהגו של עולם בין ברבים בין בייחוד. And from the great public miracles, a person can also concede to hidden miracles, which constitute the foundation of the entire Torah. As a person does not have a share in the Torah of Moshe, our teacher, until we believe that all of the things and events we encounter are all miracles.
What the heck?
And there is no nature or custom of the world with them, whether with regard to the many or to the individual.
Okay, thank you. So I just need to ask, what was the what the heck?
Sorry, that was unrelated. I should have been on mute.
Oh, okay. No, it's just funny because when I learned this source with my students a few weeks ago, they were very troubled by it. And it was the first time that I had ever learned this source, and someone actually took issue with it. So I thought maybe we had another incidence of that tonight. But what I think Ramban is telling us here, and I happen to really think this is a beautiful Ramban, is that it's very easy to recognize big miracles, right? When something really obvious happens that is defying nature, that's against all the odds, that's just so clearly not what we expected to happen or ever could have hoped might happen, that's a miracle, and it's obvious and we can appreciate it. But what Ramban does is he says, if you really think, if you ponder those large miracles and you really kind of get yourself into that mindset of understanding the world through the lens of God's ability to do large miracles, you actually start to notice what he calls the small miracles, and that's nature. And you start to recognize that even nature, which we might really take for granted, comes from God. It's divinely orchestrated. Now, of course, and I had to go into this with my students who were upset by this last time, there is a huge, huge, huge debate throughout Jewish history of what exactly it means for something to be divinely orchestrated. There is everything from, extreme divine ordination where, even a leaf falling from a tree is God dropping that leaf. And then there's the opposite side where we say God kind of set nature into motion and then nature kind of runs its course. But the mainstream view is somewhere really in between. The truth of it is somewhere in between, where nature really is something where God is behind it on some level. He is the one who orchestrated it for us. And Ramban is telling us that the real way to appreciate that is first by looking at those big miracles, and then we can come to understand that even nature is, in fact, a miracle. And I think just looking at these different sources side by side, that you could make the argument that the Mikra Bikurim, the Mikrat Bikurim, the declaration of all those big miracles of Yetziat Mitzrayim and all the ways that God was involved in our history in big and impressive ways, are really a lens and a buildup to what might otherwise seem very underwhelming, the budding of our first fruits. And it's a lens to look at those first fruits through and to say, this too is a miracle. The fact that I was able to reap my to sow my field this year and to bring in these first fruits, this is truly miraculous. Any questions so far? Any thoughts?
It was interesting to hear that you don't get to, I don't have the source in front of me, but I think it was, you don't get to go into Olam Haba or whatever if you don't believe this. Sounds a little strong.
So Ramban was not known to mince words. He really believed this. Of course, Rambam disagreed with him, so take it with a grain of salt. He really believed it. He really believed it was important. I think that there is an element of this kind of infiltrating and creating a stronghold in our Jewish philosophy, but it's not without balance in terms of other perspectives of equally important people, if I may say. So I'm not weighing in on which one I agree with more, but I think that you can look at that and say, if it's not for you, there are other avenues and other angles to look at it from that are equally legitimate. That said, were there any other questions, thoughts? Okay, so that said, with this perspective, trying to understand nature as divinely orchestrated and the Bikurim as kind of the culmination of seeing those big miracles and recognizing nature as a miracle. If you look at source number 8, what I brought here is something that's going to be familiar from benching, from Birkat Hamazon. And this is a sentiment that is an important one that is oftentimes just kind of tossed around, but that I think fits in really beautifully here in terms of how we're supposed to understand what it means to really be a farmer and to have brought fruit forward from the ground. So let's look at the next source. Okay, so when you've eaten your fill, you've given thanks to God for everything that He's given you. And you might say to yourself, or you'll say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hands have won this wealth for me. V'zacharta et Hashem Elokecha ki hu hanoten lach koach la'asot chayil leman hekim et brito ve'et nishva le'ovetecha kayom hazeh. Remember that it's the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth in fulfillment of the covenant that he made on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. Okay, so what I brought here is just a few psukim from Dvarim that I thought really perfectly encapsulated this message that we're learning from Ramban and from the Bikurim until now, which is the idea that as a farmer, or really I think any of us, I'm not a farmer, but I could totally see how this might happen to me. You might create something and you might thank God for it, but really in your heart, what are you thinking? I worked hard. I'm the one who made this, right? I put in the seeds and I tilled and I put in the water and I spent all those hours out in the field, or I did this project, I spent hours at my computer, or I put all this, these years into raising my children a certain way and look how beautifully they turned out and it's all because of me. It's very easy to fall into that sentiment. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm already seeing how when people compliment my children, I'm like, thank you, And it's very easy to think that it's kochi v'otzim yadi. It's all me. But the psukim remind us, and I think this is exactly what Ramban is alluding to and the Bikurim are alluding to, that it's not all me. Don't forget that God was in the picture. Don't forget that God was behind it all. Even in the hidden ways, even in the natural ways, even the ways we take for granted, God was behind all of that along the way. Now, I don't think we're done yet. We're getting close to wrapping up, but what I'd like to I think we still have some question marks here, which is, what is the relationship now between everything we just said and the v'samachta? How does v'samachta play into this? Whether that's the do happy or the be happy as a result, how do these two things tie together? So I'd like to bring you over to a different discipline. We're going to leave the Torah on the side here and look at a different discipline for a second. This is positive psychology. This is a study that's relatively modern in the field of psychology. Some people don't take it so seriously, but I think it actually does have a lot to say about the state of mind of happiness and a lot of, especially nowadays when so many of us are kind of dealing with unprecedented challenges, the idea of positive psychology and how our happiness, how we can actually actively work on our state of mind and our happiness is a really important field to study. So we're going to look at a source from the Harvard Health Journal, which says giving thanks can make you happier. That's the title. That almost says it all. We could almost leave it there and you would walk away kind of understanding the relationship, but I think there are some really interesting nuances that the field of positive psychology has to teach us about what exactly Bikurim does in order to produce this v'samachta state. So I'll share screen again, and if somebody would like to read, that would be excellent. Okay.
Gratitude is a thankful appreciation for what an individual receives, whether tangible or intangible. With gratitude, people acknowledge the goodness in their lives. In the process, people usually recognize that the source of that goodness lies at least partially outside themselves. As a result, gratitude also helps people connect to something larger than themselves as individuals, whether other people, nature, or a higher power. In positive psychology research, gratitude is strongly and consistently associated with greater happiness. People feel and express gratitude in multiple ways. They can apply it to the past, retrieving positive memories and being thankful for elements of childhood or past blessings, the present, not taking good fortune for granted as it comes, and the future, maintaining a hopeful and optimistic attitude.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to leave this on the screen for a minute. I cheated a little. I underlined some of what I wanted to get at, but does anybody see here resonance of what we've been talking about in terms of the Bikurim? Any parallels?
Well, the past would be Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the present is your harvest, and the future, I'm not sure.
Okay, so let's stop with that for a second. Great question. This is my own thing, but I think it works. So I think you're right. The past is kind of this remembering and the recognizing the miracles, Yetziat Mitzrayim. The present, like you said, is this harvest that you have in front of you. And maybe I did you a disservice because I didn't exactly describe, well, I did at the beginning. I said that the Bikurim are not actually the first fruits, but they're the buds of the first fruits. They're before they've even come totally to fruition. When we see that they will be the blessing that we know they have the potential to be. They're about to be the fruit. So I think it's kind of a looking forward and saying, I see here that I have something that has the potential to be good, and it will be good. And I'm looking forward and being optimistic about that. So awesome. Okay, so we have that past, present, future dynamic. What else is going on here?
I think when the farmer walks into the field and sees those first buds, a farmer would want to acknowledge the goodness in their lives, that the tree, for example, has survived a winter and is now come back to life and is going to produce important food, and to acknowledge and be grateful for that fact.
Yes. Absolutely. And with the Bikurim, what we have is not just I'm thinking it, I'm looking at my fruits and I'm able to appreciate it, but I'm actually able to acknowledge it, which to me is a more declarative version of appreciating something.
Yeah.
You also have to be consciously looking for it. Okay? It's not, I'm sure, whether farmers are giving Bikurim or not, they'll be going through their fields every now and then seeing how things are doing. But if you're going, there was a fascinating article several years ago, I think in the Wall Street Journal, about a farmer whose wheat was being used for, a farmer here in the United States whose wheat was going to be used for matzah. And he was talking about how he ended up being able to check his field more differently or more carefully, because the rabbi would come and say, it's good if the wheat has this much moisture content, it'll make the better matzah or whatever. And he was so struck with what the mashgiach was looking for way ahead of time, that he then also became much more conscious about all the other things that were going on in the field. So I think it's that conscious looking for the present, for the future.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think you're absolutely right. Okay, so I'll add one more thing, and I'm happy to take any more thoughts, but I also want to respect everyone's time and wrap up. But there's a really beautiful idea by Rav Soloveitchik. Hold on, I'm actually going to stop sharing screen again. A beautiful idea by Rav Soloveitchik where he says that the concept of simcha in the Torah, the word happiness, only ever appears in relation to lifnei Hashem, before God. And that really, for him, the whole idea of being happy can only be spoken about in the context of knowing before whom you stand, knowing that God is really at the top of your joy, that reference that we got from the Sefer HaChinuch, which I think is really beautiful. There are a lot of nods to that idea in different places. But I think that you see that even in the Harvard Health article about positive psychology, where it says that part of being happy and being able to live a positive life is actually recognizing that there's something greater than yourself and connecting to that source. It doesn't talk about God, it's psychology. You wouldn't want it to, but there is a part of our psyche that craves and needs to connect to something greater than ourselves in order to truly find simcha, to find happiness, which I love that idea. I think that's really, really beautiful. and just ties those elements together. And what I think we've done here, you can feel free to disagree, but I think we've actually answered all of our original questions. We originally asked, or we saw the dichotomy between the Mikra Bikurim and the Hava'at Bikurim, and we kind of asked, whether explicitly or not, what's the difference between these two elements of the mitzvah? What does each one uniquely add? And I think that we saw that the Hava'at, the bringing of it, has its own place, but the mikra, the declaration, is uniquely poignant. It's powerful in really helping us recognize the good and connecting to that greater source. We came to understand what the relationship is between Yetziat Mitzrayim and these first fruits. Why do we talk about all these miracles? What's with the history lesson? It's actually because it's kind of a lens, an attitude of gratitude, a way to bring us to that state of v'samachta. And again, like I said, I really think the do happy or be happy are really the same idea, because if you are connecting with that history lesson and that gratitude, and you're able to really declare and connect with everything that has happened to you in the past and the present and will happen in the future, you can come to that state of happiness, or maybe you've created that state of happiness. Maybe that's the do happy. And we've really, and I think we've answered that question of what it means, v'samachta. Maybe it's a directive, maybe it's not, but it kind of ties together what the relationship is between those psukim. So what I'd like to do now is just end off with a last sentiment. This is by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, where he talks about different kinds of happiness. And it's not an exact read into our shir tonight, I'll tell you that. I think he doesn't exactly have the same thesis that we do, but he talks about the different kinds of happiness and joy that exist, and I think that you'll see resonances of what we just learned. So let me share the screen one last time. Okay, so Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says in his article, The Pursuit of Joy, happiness, ashrei, is something you pursue, but joy, simcha, is not. It discovers you. It has to do with a sense of connection to other people or to God. Joy lives not in thoughts of tomorrow, but in grateful acceptance of celebration of today. We are here. We are alive. We are among others who share our sense of jubilation. We are living in God's land, enjoying his blessing, eating the produce of his earth, watered by his rain, brought to fruition under his sun, breathing the air he breathed into us and living the life he renews in us each day. When we focus on the moment, allowing ourselves to dance, sing, and give thanks, then there is joy. And I think that this really speaks for itself. It's a really beautiful testament to the idea that gratitude is so intrinsically connected to simcha, to happiness. The attitude of gratitude, the choice to be grateful, and to really do that by recognizing the big miracles and the small miracles, and to really notice the small things in our lives, the natural things in our lives that at first glance don't seem so miraculous, but to say it's not kochi v'otzem yadi, it's not something that's all my doing, but there's a God behind this, and I can connect with that source, and I can be grateful for it. That's what brings us to v'samachta b'chol hatov. That's what brings us to a true place of happiness. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions, but nobody should feel pressured to stay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you, Tal, so much for a wonderful class. We're so happy that you were back and to learn with you again. We hope to have you again soon. In the chat, I just posted some information about some of Mayan's upcoming classes that I spoke about at the beginning of the class. And if you're looking to make a contribution to help us continue to offer these classes for free, there's a link to our donate page. And of course, we're looking for sponsorships. And again, thank you to Shari Tefila for helping to co-sponsor tonight's shiur. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. And thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful Chag Sameach towards the end of this week, and a great week getting there.
Thank you.
Don't forget to count the Omer.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Ilana. Great lecture. Thank you.
you.